This is a test of the emergency broadcast system.
5. Check for sound. 4.
It's showtime.
3.
Let's
2.
go.
1.
Welcome to the Pro Audio Suite, a podcast for audio and voiceover professionals. Don't forget to check us out on our Facebook, the Pro Audio Suite Podcast. Now let's get on with the show. From Los Angeles, George Whittam. From Chicago, Robert Marshall. From Sydney, Australia, Robbo. And from sunny Melbourne, Andrew Peters. This is the Pro Audio Suite. Welcome to another Pro Audio Suite. This week we have a special guest, Scott Rummell. How are you, Scott?
Doing great. How are you guys today?
Good. Now, I know you're sitting on George's knee in your studio.
Yeah.
It's
hello,
not
George.
that small.
They're drinking Pims. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. No, I think they're drinking IPA, but that's another story. Now, we were talking before we started the show about working remotely, and you were telling the story about how you got into your home studio.
Yes. Well, my drive from Orange County to LA, it's about 30 miles. You know, toward the end of my time in LA, I was doing 40,000 miles a year on my car because I would start my day in Burbank, then go over to CBS and Santa Monica to do a commercial, and I just was done with it. So I worked a lot at a studio called Woodholly, which was kind of the epicenter of trailer and promo in Hollywood. And I used to see Don LaFontaine every day, pretty much, that I was there because we were both in and out of there. And I love seeing Don. And so I said to the studio manager, I said, "Hey, where's Don been?" Thinking he was on vacation. She goes, "Oh, he's working from home." And I said, "What about the limo?" She said, "Yeah, no more limo." And a light bulb went on in my head. And I was like, well, if Don's working from home, then I could work from home. So we set up my studio with the ISDN and everything. And then I called my agent and I said, "Hey, I'm not coming back to LA." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Yeah, I'm working from home now." He goes, "Dude, that's a horrible decision. You're going to lose business." I said, "Yeah, I don't think so." And he said, "Well, what if, ABC or CBS doesn't want you to work from home?" I said, "Well, I'm not driving to LA anymore, so that's the deal." And
You put your foot down.
And that was true. And everybody was totally fine with it. And my work increased drastically because I wasn't at the mercy of traffic.
Right.
And people had access to me.
You were more reliably available.
Totally.
They knew when you were going to be available. It was like no question.
Yeah. And the commute down the stairs was a lot easier than the commute to LA. So nobody had to wait for me, and people were happy about that. And so I think Hal Douglas was working from his home studio first, then Don did it. And then I believe it was me, then maybe Ashton Smith, and
Bo Weaver's in there somewhere.
Yeah, Bo Weaver was in there, but I think to make the jump to full time, I literally was one of the very first. And it's good and bad. I miss seeing my buddies around what we used to say, see around campus, which could
all
be
LA,
anywhere.
right?
Yeah, it was all of LA.
Studio zone.
We'd see at a casting place or a studio or at, Disney or wherever. But it made my life just a lot better, spending more time with the family and just was great taking that traffic out of it. I felt my sessions were better because I wasn't so stressed. And so working from home was awesome. And I didn't think that I would be a pioneer in this or put George to work full time.
That's what you guys don't know.
Yeah.
I have a new job.
Yeah, that's right.
But, it became this thing. And now it's funny because if I'm in LA for an event or a Laker game or something and ABC needs me, I go over there. They literally have to take boxes out of their booth and storage out of their booth so I can sit in there. Yeah, wow. Because nobody uses their booth anymore. And that was the other thing too. Liz from ABC, she's a story engineer. She literally was the first person to use the 416 microphone for voiceover. She was Ernie Anderson's recording engineer. Ernie did not want to go in the booth anymore.
He was the Love Boat. Famous on the Love Boat.
I know this
show.
story. Yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah. So she did all these tests with different mics.
I didn't know that was Liz. This is cool here because I've heard so many pieces of this story. But I haven't heard this.
So it was Liz. And Liz told me the whole story. She set up a bunch of different mics right there at the console. And the one that was awesome was the 416. And then what she realized was not only was it a great mic, because Ernie was working on a U87 in the booth, I think.
Yeah.
And then not only was it great for proximity and not hearing room noise, but it cut through better than the U87 on the promos. And then before you knew it,
it was a happy accident, kind of.
It was a happy accident. And, like I was just up in Eugene, Oregon, and I had a session that I had to run to, and I was already checked out of my hotel room. I go to this little studio in Eugene, Oregon, and I had a Disney session. And the guy has an Avalon preamp into a 416. He has
even
my
in
vocal.
Eugene.
At a house in Eugene.
Huh.
And I was just thinking, Liz started all of that. But
That's amazing.
anyway, that's my story of how I came home to work, and it's been, now it's been almost another 18 years. I spent 18 years driving, and then 18 years at home now.
Yeah.
So
Obviously, having a home studio has been good business-wise, but what are the challenges of having a home studio in terms of running and maintaining it? What sort of challenges do you run into
just getting a hold of George. That's my toughest issue. No,
so
he's
busy
awesome.
doing podcasts with us. That's why he's too busy.
Right.
It's hard for me to think of a downside, except for as I was thinking about the relationships where we would see all my buddies around town. It's really, there's not I don't think there's a downside to it unless there's something you could nudge me on that you're thinking.
I can nudge you, definitely, because I've just done a road trip up to what we call Ayers Rock, Uluru, the big rock in the middle of Australia. And it was a car trip, so it was, I think it's about 2,000 miles, I guess, there and back. Oh, no, there. So 4,000 miles there and back.
Jeez, okay.
So we were stopping in hotels and motels and apartments, whatever. So, but the thing is, of course, when you're known for working remotely, there's an expectation that you're going to be available. So therefore, you're taking a road case with you, and then you've got the problem of trying to work out how you can make the room sound half decent and the equipment you've got. That's the thing I find difficult. It's the golden handcuffs. So my question is for you, what do you use when you hit the road?
So I will tell you that I have found, and I travel at least once a month. I'm an empty nester now. And so my wife and I will always be traveling. Like I'm going to Kauai next week. And this sounds crazy, but I have a setup that I use. I always get a room that has a desk. I take the luggage rack. I take 2 couch cushions off, and I put them on either side. I lay a towel on the desk, and then I put a couple of actual sleeping pillows up on the top in a kind of a backward angle, so it's not, perfectly square. Then I tend to do a test with maybe one of the studios just to make sure that everything's good. And I've never had one complaint. And then the other thing too is some of my friends were doing sessions from cars because they were telling me, a car is built like a studio. It's built to keep sound out and have beautiful sound inside. And I never did it until I was leaving Lake Tahoe, California, and my agent called me, and I was the voice of the Dunkirk campaign, and I was on the road, and he said, Scott, you have to do a session before you get to the airport. And so we pulled over into a camp area, a campsite, and I used my hotspot, and I did it from a Chevy Suburban. And I
From,
heard
like, the back seat, or?
Yeah, I went into the back seat and I recorded it, and with my, 416 and everything. And I heard the spot on the air and I was blown away at how great it sounded. I was like, and then it makes me think, why did I build this beautiful studio at home? I can just do this from,
walk down to the garage.
Wherever.
Yeah.
Right. But I have grown in the very beginning, because I'm old school. I really kind of fought the whole golden handcuffs thing, because I was thinking, gosh, I need to be in my studio. And then, the more I do out of the studio and hear it on the air, I'm pretty good with it. I'm okay. And the trade-off is that freedom, but if you have a hotel room that has one of those little luggage holders and a desk and a couple of cushions, you can make a pretty good sounding studio.
Or
I know that probably...
board.
What?
Or an ironing board.
That's what I use.
Yeah, I've never used the ironing board, but because I have my standard go-to.
Yeah, you have a go-to.
And I take pictures in every studio, and I send them out and say, this is my Napa studio. This is my Dallas studio. This is my New Orleans studio.
Yeah. So you've got a 41.6 on the road with you. What else is in the road kit?
So in my road kit, I use something called a USB pre, which is... It's actually the box that the M audio box was built to model after, but it's built like a tank. I mean, it's all metal, real knobs. It's like a nice little piece of gear.
Yeah, it's made by Sound Devices. It's a very pro level piece of gear.
Yeah.
It's made for road use.
It's like maybe 4.5 inches long and 2 inches tall, so it fits in great. It's a little heavier than some of the ones that are made of plastic. And I bought that probably 15 years ago, and I've just never had a need to go to something else. It just works. It sounds good. It sounds very much, not perfectly, but it mirrors the Avalon, which is my thing, and it sounds great. And then I've been using a program for the same amount of time called Audio TX.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing is, I'm Mac-based, so the Audio TX is not. It's Windows-based. So I just have my MacBook Pro, and I have Boot Camp, and I just go over to that, and that's the only program I run on it. And then...
Utility, it just does that one thing.
Yeah, it's just that.
It's like an appliance.
Yeah, and it works great. It always sounds great. The thing I like about it is I don't have to have super high-speed internet for it to work awesome. And, so I'm if it's not broke, don't fix it guy.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Someday it'll break, but when it does, I'll be here.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
That's not foreboding. I don't mean that. I just mean...
He's rubbing his hands together right now.
He's had it a long time.
Yeah.
Maybe installing Catalina might break that long tradition.
Oh, baby. Yeah, Catalina OS.
Yeah. And now we're dealing with a problem in the U.S. with ISDN. I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but
where it's being pulled out, yeah.
They do not want to continue to support ISDN. So what's crazy is at my beach home, I have a studio, and I got my bill, and I haven't used that studio for a while because they're rebuilding that house right now. And the price was $800 for 1 month with one usage.
AT&T, right?
Yeah. It was AT&T. Yeah. And so guess what? No more ISDN lines at Dana Point, California, because that's ridiculous. The other thing, though, is too, really my only clients now that are doing ISDN are the networks. So like ABC, CBS, Fox. But truthfully, most of the movie trailer stuff that I'm now doing is all just record and send. I might have one directed session in the beginning of a campaign, like for Avengers Endgame. I had one recorded session, and then I had maybe 100 non-supervised sessions.
Yeah. Is that a trend? I mean, a trend in terms of it's not. It's just the way it's done now.
Yes, and I have a theory, and my theory is that the millennials who are now taking over the positions do not want to talk to anybody.
No.
They want to text and email.
Right.
That's it. They do not want to get the human voice involved. And to me, it's okay, because a lot of the direction I've been getting from the millennials is, that was good. Could you do it faster? That's like the number one piece of direction, And so that is a whole new world where we used to have these directors that were just crazy good, that had a vision. But now the trend is, I would say 90% of my trailer work is done read and send.
So that means that the art of trailers, the way you know it, is dead, because anybody that wants to get into trailers now doesn't have 10 years of experience working with directors anymore.
Yeah, and I was so blessed to have some of the best directors ever. These guys were really filmmakers, and they had a complete vision.
Yeah,
that is not what they're doing today. I mean, I think they do have a vision, but what it's caused the voice actor to do is I have to think ahead for them. Many times there's not even direction on the copy. Mm-hmm. And like I'm doing a campaign for Disney now called Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. By the way, I don't say it like that when I'm doing it. Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. That's more the style.
Yeah.
But we have to do kid spots that are appropriate for the Disney Channel. We have to do very scary spots because they want to get that audience. And then we have to do middle of the road. So I have to make sure that in each file I send that I've covered all of that direction, because they can't even say it's a kid spot because they may use that same copy, that script, on a scary one. So I have to do it all three ways. So I have to kind of think ahead.
You're anticipating that.
I'm anticipating that I don't want them to call me back and say, hey, could you do this again, but, make it more fun or whatever. So that's just kind of part of my standard operating procedure.
Which is exactly the same as I do for my overseas clients, Singapore and the Middle East. So I will always give them 3 reads.
Man, I didn't know that was even a voiceover market. How do I get in there? I got to take over all that work you've got.
Well, I'll tell you what, you get me the trailers over there and I'll give you we'll do a swap.
By the way, you have an absolutely gorgeous voice.
Oh, thank you very much.
Just beautiful.
We should hang out together.
I can hear that beautiful chest and nasal resonance, and I'll bet you're very busy with what you do over there.
Funny you should say that. And the best thing about how to get really busy is to go away on a road trip.
Book a trip, yeah. You want to get busy, book a trip.
Oh, I used to do that.
Crazy.
I swear to you guys, I used to call my agent in the morning and say, hey, you know what? I'm taking today off. And they go, what? Yeah, you could call me if you want to, but I'm just going to go to the beach today. And literally, that would be a 10-session day. Just putting it out there, right?
Because you reached out to him. Now you're like top of mind.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, but Scott would be perfect.
Imagine what would happen then if you turned around and said to your agent, hey, listen, I've had to think about it. I'm actually retiring.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Oh, man.
The other thing I found, too, because I did used to take 10 days, 2 weeks off a year from Mike. I was off Mike. And whenever I would tell my agents, they would call all my clients, and suddenly there was this huge rush of work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even though I'm still available, I still tell them, call everybody and tell them I'm going on vacation, because it tends to really increase. They're thinking, what are we going to need Scott for? We're going to need Scott for this,
Right.
So, yeah.
I had a classic. I went to, we had a couple of weeks up on Heron Island, which is a remote island on the Great Barrier Reef.
Oh, my goodness.
So basically, you've got no telephone, no internet. The only place you could get internet was either a reception or the bar. So the day would start, I'd go to the bar in the morning.
Not for the internet connection, though.
Have a quick gin and tonic for breakfast. No. And I'd check my emails, get all the scripts downloaded, go back to the room, record the scripts in the morning, and then in the afternoon, if nothing else came in, I'd go back to the bar and then send everything out. And that was the only way I could work. It was so remote.
That's cool. I mean, I think we all have these stories. Some of my favorite stories is in, I think it was 2016. I was on the Jack Reacher campaign, and I was on this big Royal Caribbean cruise ship, and
with the rock climbing wall and all that fun stuff.
So great with my whole family.
Yeah.
And I literally did the majority of the Jack Reacher campaign from the cruise ship. And it was awesome and fine. Well, then I like to sail, and we were down in the British Virgin Islands, and we had a 50-foot catamaran. And I was with another voice actor and a producer and their wives. And we have a great burger place over here called In-N-Out Burger. I don't know if you have heard of it, but
That's an unfortunate name for a food.
Yeah.
It's an odd name.
It's an odd name.
For a good burger.
It's wildly popular.
Line around
People
the block.
from around the country, they fly into LA. The first place they go is In-N-Out Burger, and they've got like 3 of them around LAX.
Right.
So anyway, my friend has been the voice of this In-N-Out Burger for 30 years. So I'm in one cabin of a catamaran that's literally on the water, and we have a hot spot. He's in the other cabin, and we are both doing voiceover. I'm doing movie trailer and promo stuff, and he's doing his commercial stuff. And again, I think when you talk about the golden handcuffs, I think it's changed. I think we can do this stuff. I think we can have more freedom to be able to travel and do our thing. And I don't know if it's really that the companies don't care as much about the audio as they used to. There may be some of that. But I also think there's so many new tools now that people can use in post to do stuff that it's just never, it's not an issue anymore.
The only thing you can't really deal with is like if you're in a super hollow space, like really reverberant and echoey, that's not good.
No.
But as long as you kill off the echo, if there's a little hiss or rumble or whatever, they can fix that so easily in post now.
And what I find, honestly, is that the 416 is just the mic to use in those situations. And I think when you have it in a space like I'm talking about with the cushions and everything, you are part of the blockage of that. So you're not getting a lot of room noise. Though I will tell you, we had one incident in Boston where we had a room where we could not turn off the air conditioner, and I was hearing that hiss. So my beautiful wife got up on a chair with a stack of pillows holding it up against there.
Oh, man.
And it was a long session, and the poor thing, her arms were like jelly, but that's the support of a good voiceover wife right there.
Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, mostly it works out great, you know? So I think we're in a new era, and it's given us a little bit more freedom, which I love.
You know, you don't have to find somewhere with ISDN anymore. You can beam straight in with Source Connect from your hotel room, which is perfect.
Yes. And Source Connect is very much like Audio TX.
Yeah.
The only difference for me is I had Audio TX really before Source Connect had fixed a lot of
that was out a really long time ago. You're talking about Audio TX Communicator is the name of the app, and that was out 15 years ago?
Yeah. It works every time like a charm. I've never had an issue with it. And in the early days, I did try Source Connect, and there was so many dropouts that it was an issue.
Yeah, it was.
So I just didn't feel that I should change. Now everybody's telling me Source Connect is great, and you guys sound great. And so at some point when Audio TX isn't supportable or something, I'll probably make that move.
Yeah.
But this is we're using Source Connect now, which is the one that runs on our browser. I don't think it's being used as so much for an actual set, like a record where they record you remotely. I think it's being used more for direction. So it's like a really high quality foam patch. But Source Connect is being used more for Source Connect Standard and Pro, I think, are being used more for actual sessions. But this thing is great because Source Connect now will work in a less than ideal. It'll work on bad networks. It'll work on firewall networks a lot better. So there's pros and cons between all this stuff. you know?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like the whole beta versus VHS. I think one's going to rise to the top because people are telling me about IPDTL
or IPDITL.
IPDITL, right? And people are telling me about VISDN, and they're telling me about other things. But one of these is going to rise to the top the same way Source Connect has.
Right.
Reno Romano, a friend of mine, he has a new version of Audio TX that he just raves about. And I don't really even know what that is, but he said there's absolutely no delay. Do you know what that is?
No, but Reno is a total closet geek, man.
Yeah.
He tries everything new that comes out. And he
loves, this is his go-to, is the Audio TX, the new version, which I don't have. But
I haven't checked it out.
Yeah.
We've talked about your road rig, Scott. What about your home studio where you are right now? How did that come about, and what are you running?
So, George is right here, and he's built both of my studios. Do you want to tell them what's here, George? Or do you want me to tell them?
Well, you can tell them what's new, what's the same and what's new in this room. Because you've been in this room for quite some time.
Yeah.
And
18 years, I think.
It was time for a makeover.
Yes.
So what's the before?
So I drew up a design that I felt would be more of a cockpit, and I had a number of issues. One was I would have to be out of my studio booth to go press the record, then come in, record, then go out and edit and everything. So George knew that was something I wanted to take care of. I also wanted to have the ability to have 2 microphones, so something other than the 416 for when I'm doing something that's appropriate where I could use that mic for narration or, whatever. And so that was something I wanted to be able to monitor in the room. Also, this is a weird request, but I'm kind of a collector, and I love to have like stuff on the walls around me. It just makes me happy. And so I needed to figure out how to get some of the sound absorption off the wall and off the walls in the room. And so then I wanted to maybe have access to other sounds of preamps and different things. And so really what I had before was just a studio booth that had my ISDN, my Avalon, and my 416. And now when you walk in, it really is striking because it looks like a real studio. It looks like something you'd walk into in Hollywood. And I kind of had just, I had a rolling rack that George got me. I had I just had a regular mic stand. I had a music stand to hold my copy on, which I didn't even use.
Yeah, it was a little cluttered, it was cobbled together, different stuff. Yeah.
And now I walk in and George just did a beautiful job. And I have these beautiful built-in cabinets. I have my beautiful monitor right in front of me that I can record and read from. And as I mentioned before, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And so at a certain point, being at other friends' studios going, you know what, I should probably really have a real studio. My studio is working, but let's have a real studio.
Yeah.
And, I just wanted to make sure that this voiceover thing was going to work out before I spent the money. But, 30 years later or whatever, I have this really gorgeous studio that I just love.
Is there something unique about the room, the way you built it or designed it?
The thing that makes the room special for us is, again, it did have a lot of acoustical panels scattered around the walls, which is pretty conventional. I mean, that's the way we do a lot of booths. But, it ended up that those panels ended up being placed to hang things. So then there was stuff tacked all over the panels, and it was cluttered, and, there wasn't a lot of room to display things. So that was part of the idea, is to reduce the amount of panels on the walls to the absolute bare minimum. So now at this point on the wall, flanking his monitor where he's facing, is just two 2x4 foot panels on the wall. That is it. Wow. The rest has no stuff on the walls. Ordinarily, that would not fly. But the entire ceiling is one gigantic acoustic panel or a panel system. It's a cloud. And It was quite a project to build it. We actually built it twice. The first time, it just didn't work. It didn't look as clean. It didn't have the vision that Scott had. And so we rebuilt it again. And now when you look up at the ceiling, you kind of don't really see anything. You see what? You see 6 light cans in the ceiling. You see the air conditioning vent. And then it's a fabric ceiling. Wow. So what you're not seeing is what's behind it, which is all the acoustic treatment. So it's all behind the fabric. And it speaks for itself. We have 2 microphones in here right now. So we have 2 open mics, which is usually a problem in a smaller studio, but we can get away with it here. And it sounds great. It's not super dead. There's a little bit of liveliness in here. The wall behind where Scott is sitting is actually completely open. It's flat. So you get a little bit of bounce off of it, but it's okay. It's just a little lively, just enough.
Which I actually like. When I first was coming into this room after you did it, I was skeptical that this was really going to work.
Yep.
But I love the sound. I absolutely love the sound. And I am shocked that we were able to get rid of all these panels. How many panels did we get rid of? I mean,
there were like at least 10 different sizes and shapes of panels in here.
And so we literally have 2 panels right in front of me just for the bounce. And then the ceiling takes care of the rest of it. And it's, I know it's similar to what you did at Howard's place, which was even a kind of...
there's a lot of glass. Well, there's a lot of glass here. I mean, just to my left is about a 3x3 glass window. Glass window? Who ever heard of such a thing? And right behind me is the door to the booth is a glass. It's got a huge glass pane in it. Most of the door is glass. So there's a lot of glass in here. And yet the ceiling, because it's so super dead and damped, it does the trick. So the studio is like a mishmash of old and new. So it's got the old mic. It's got the Avalon preamp, the old Zephyr 9202. I have my hand on it physically right now. It feels like where you'd put your coffee to keep it warm.
Right.
It's probably like 110 degrees. It's toasty.
Yeah.
But it has a big vent. There's a big space above it to keep, so it can vent.
Uh-huh.
And then there's the Avalon 737. There's a DAT recorder in the rack, which just
DAT
in case
recorder. That must be collecting dust.
Archive old stuff.
The truth of that is I used to write and produce jingles in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And so I have a lot of my stuff on DAT. And so I didn't really want to get rid of it because I have, a few hundred DATs that, I can listen to transfer to digital at some point.
Yep. I have a DAT and a D88 at my parents' in their basement collecting dust for the same reason.
This is very uncool, but I'll confess that I got rid of my rack-mounted DAT and all I kept was a portable Sony DAT machine, like a DAT Walkman, because
a DAT man or DAT Walkman,
Just like you guys, I have probably 300 DATs from my radio days with movie drops and grabs of songs and acoustic recordings and all that sort of stuff.
Imagine the day you're just dying to play one of those tapes.
And
you can't find a DAT recorder.
Either that or it won't work. I kind of figured out. So
rubber belts and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, George actually, for me too, it got me a cassette deck.
Well, you had one.
I had one, but it stopped working.
Some kind of failure.
And so he got me one, and I probably have 1,000 cassettes,
Really? Wow.
Yeah, because in the early days of voiceover, but what was awesome was I was able to find literally the very first commercial I ever did. And I was able to find my first demos and all of that stuff and put them onto my digital on computer. And so slowly but surely, it's still hard, but I have gotten rid of a lot of those cassettes just going through. And again, I probably have 1,000 LPs. And so I have that. George set that up for me.
He's got all that. He's got all the playback devices you would want. The rest of the gear, we talked about all the different cool playbacks we have. We have all kinds of playback devices. The things that are new in this room, besides the acoustics, are like Scott said, he has a control surface. I mean, he has a monitor, a keyboard, and mouse in here, which is actually not really a small feat because the control room or his office where his computer is not right outside the window. It's actually kind of like wrapped around on the other side of the wall. So we had to interconnect all that stuff. It's a logistical challenge because we have a lot of gear in and outside of the studio and all had to be tied together. And the thing that ties them together is a single optical cable. It's a Toast-Link cable. Actually, it's a Thunderbolt cable that interconnects via fiber optic because you can't run a Thunderbolt more than 10 feet. So it's about a 15, 16-foot run, and it's an optical cable. It's like a $200 cable. But it's what allows us to connect the iMac, which is 10 feet away by line of sight and into the studio, and then everything else connects over that through a hub. And then the center of the studio now, really the main thing that is the brain of the studio is now your good old Universal Audio Apollo. And there's an Apollo Twin that's serving as the AD converter and the playback and some processing. Now, Scott just uses his 416 with his Avalon, just like he always has, and that goes into the Apollo as a line-in. But then the Vanguard V13, which is the mic I'm talking on right now, it goes right into the Apollo, and now we're using some of the Apollo's processing on this mic. We're right now using the 610B preamp and the Precision channel strip for compression, and then we're using an LA2A for a limiter to kind of fatten it up. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
It does sound very good, indeed. And I love the 2A too, can I just say?
Yeah, the LA2A is just an amazing piece of gear. But we still have a Mackie 1402 mixer in here. That is still part of the system because it's nice to have a physical box that you can grab knobs and sliders. And it's the traffic cop for all the audio. You know, it sends audio to and from the Zephyr. It sends audio to the studio monitors, to the headphone amplifier. And it does all of the routing from one thing to the next. And for me, the hardest part, frankly, was creating all the mixes. So there's a speaker mix, there's a headphone mix, and then the headphone mix feeds the studio control room monitors outside for people that want to listen in. And then, you know, all that has to be done so that they don't interfere with each other. Also, so it's not hard to use, so Scott can easily use everything. And then to be able to switch between the two mics, which is done with the Apollo, is done with a mouse. But it works pretty seamlessly. It wasn't perfect, even until today. We did this 3 or 4 months ago, and we still Scott had a couple of wish list items, so I was able to come in here and repatch a couple things, reroute a few things, and now everything works the way I had intended. You don't have to jump through any hoops to make anything work. It's a very much set it and forget it studio now, which I'm really proud of. I think it came out really nice.
And that's the thing that I love about George, even though throughout the years I've learned, a bit. I've learned what I've needed to know. He really has made this studio so that I can walk in the morning and flip one button and the whole thing works. I have pictures of everything because a couple of times my house cleaners have decided to dust off my Avalon or my my Mackie mixer. And I remember one time ABC goes, your studio doesn't sound right. I'm like, oh no. And I look at my Avalon and everything was, completely
all over the place,
changed. But yeah, George had taken pictures and sent them to me so I have them on my computer so I can always just look and go, oh yeah, this is wrong.
Some of the most disgusting places I've ever been are studios where they will not allow anybody to clean.
Yeah, right.
And they don't either.
I have to confess that I have 5 kids, but my second youngest is nearly 2. And usually I've got a lock on the studio door, and usually I lock it when I'm not in here. But I just walked out for a coffee the other day and ended up chatting to the wife for 15 minutes, only to walk back in to find red marker pen all over my Mac keyboard.
Oh, lovely.
Oh no!
So yeah, that was nice. So Apple have since scored another $99 Australian for me to go up and buy a new keyboard. So.
That's not as bad as me taking a Sharpie permanent pen and trying to draw a pinstripe on my dad's 1969 Saab Sonnet.
Oh, lovely
sports car, which was fiberglass bodied, not painted. So you can't paint over that.
How old were you?
I would say 2.
Oh my
I would
goodness.
say 2 or 3, probably around the same age.
Oh, well, I have a new year-old granddaughter, and she's walking around the house and stuff. And you can believe that I keep the studio door closed and locked when she's around because she wants to get into everything. So those are the real issues, right?
But it's interesting you're talking about bare walls, and since we're on the subject of kids anyway, I've done the same thing in here because my walls are, well, obviously there is some acoustic treatment, but interweaved with that is, paintings of me and Sophie playing on the swings at the park and all the other stuff. I think if you're going to have a home studio, let's be honest, that's part of the reason you do it. You want to be around your family. You want to spend more time with them. And I think you need to reflect that in the environment that you're working in.
Yeah. Absolutely, because those are the important things.
Absolutely.
And that's the way I feel too. So, I have all these things around that remind me of why I'm doing this. I have pictures of my family, and it really was thanks to George for really figuring out this whole ceiling sound cloud that was able to accomplish that, because I was just stunned at the sound. Yeah, it really, really works, and I don't know why everyone doesn't do this, but I have a friend that lives down the street named Chris Fries, and he's probably one of the top commercial voices in the country. And I told him that you did the SoundCloud, and he was so mad. He goes, I didn't know you could do that, because he had just spent all this money on custom fabrics for his wall treatments, and he was like irritated. I don't know if he said anything to you.
No, he didn't. No, he we don't have a cloud in his booth, but we have like panels that are kind of splayed along the ceiling,
Yeah.
But maybe that'll be in 3 or 5 years when he gets tired and he wants to do another remodel.
Another job for you, George. That's right.
So before we wrap this up, Scott, what's the one piece of advice you would give to anybody getting into the industry?
I hate to say this because it sounds so cynical, but sometimes I say to people, if you can live without doing this, you're probably not built for it. Mm-hmm. Because it is one of the most frustrating pursuits that I know of, because it is, it's just a tough competitive industry. So be prepared that when people call me and say that they want to be a voice actor, I know that they're going to get to LA and they're going to find people that really want to be voice actors. So you have to be prepared for that. So, but if you are passionate and this is something that you absolutely want to do, and I've helped a number of people who've achieved some great success in this. I wouldn't call myself a coach, but if somebody comes to me and they really have a passion. Somebody just came to me recently and said that from the time they were a little girl, they used to play with tape recorders and do voices and all of that stuff.
Really?
And yes.
It seems so rare for a girl to say that.
But you know what? Another one came to me a few years ago, and same thing. And I said, okay. And I really gave her a hand and told her, who to study with and all those kinds of things. And now she's doing many cartoon shows. It's not been named yet, but she's the voice of a very new iconic character that's been around for years, but she's the new voice. And so I think there is a difference between somebody that says, hey, I hear that's a great way to make some money, or people have told me I have a great voice, or whatever.
I need another income stream.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen. It's just, it's one of those things that it's like, I tell people in the States that it's like you just told me you want to be on a Major League Football team, on an NFL team. You have to play Pop Warner football, with the kids, junior football, and then you got to play high school football. You got to do all this stuff and go through this stuff before, and then it's only a few that actually make it to the top, that make it to an actual income. And so, but if you are a person that loves this and thinks of it as an art form, you can do this. This is something that you can do if you're committed. You can learn. So many good coaches, so many opportunities. And so, but what I normally find is that somebody does a demo tape and their family says, oh, it sounds great. And then they get rejected and that's the end of their voiceover career, you know? Or they get one commercial and, you know, they have to wait 2 years for another one and then they're all done.
One hit wonder.
But this is something, if I did a TED Talk recently at Yale, and I told my story, and I talked about my grandpa's tape recorder, which is sitting right here next to me in my studio. And from the time I was a little kid, the first thing I would say is I would go to him and say, can I borrow your tape recorder? I'd go in the back room and pretend it was a studio and record voices. And so that's a difference than what most people who want to enter voiceover, like that was inbred in me somehow. Somehow I loved the recorded voice. I loved the art form. So anyway, I don't think everybody has to be like that exactly, but I do think that there has to be a different understanding that this is not just a way to make money, and that almost the voice is just one of the elements of becoming a successful voice actor. You have to, one of the key things is learning how to take direction or give yourself different direction or not become married to a certain sound or read. You know, and so there's, you know, I could go on about that for a long time, but
I want to be respectful of your time, but I've also, from what you've just said, I've also got one more question, if you've got a second.
Sure.
You mentioned that at the end of every year, the first thing on your list of next year's to-do list is to get better as a voiceover artist. For someone who's been doing it for 30, 40 odd years, what does that look like for you? How do you make sure that you live up to that promise to yourself every year?
I will tell you that, you know, another great voice actor named Brian Cummings, who's not as active now, but he told me, hey, Scott, you know, as you grow, because I was in my 20s when I started and now I'm approaching 60 now. And he said, the good news is you're going to have so much life experience and your voice timbre is going to drop and change. You'll actually end up with more range. And he said, it's an instrument. You know, my mentor said, God gave you a Stradivarius, but you have to learn how to play it. And I think like any great musician, if you're really wanting to get better, you'll figure out ways to get better. I will listen to people who will give me maybe a piece of direction. I'll give you an example. I was doing this thing called, what was it called? I can't even remember the name of the movie. Clover something, the Cloverfield or... Oh,
Cloverfield?
Something, Cloverfield.
The horror movie?
Yeah.
The monster movie.
Yeah, it was like a monster movie. Anyway, the director said to me, I want no voice. I said, well, you came to the right place. You know, it's like, you know, you hired a voice actor to have no voice. She goes, no, I almost want nothing. You know, like, just like right here in this place where there's hardly any inflection and any volume. And I thought she was crazy. And then I heard it in the theater and I thought, this is brilliant. And then I started doing that on other movies, and then people started requesting it. And it became an art form because my mentor, Dawes Butler, told me, you can touch a word with the same weight as the dust on a moth's wings. It's just enough to make all the difference. And when you're at a low volume and you're working the mic incredibly close, just the simplest weight on a word can change the subtext, can change everything. And so that was a way for me to learn. And then every year, I'm trying new things. I'm trying different kinds of tones and sounds, and I'll pitch stuff up or pitch it down. But you know, I just constantly am focused on being better. And one of the reasons I put that on, and by the way, it's not first on the list. Losing weight is always first. But I think that by putting it on the list, it makes me aware that I'm not, you know, even though I am a, you know, known quantity in this world of voiceover here in the States, it makes me be aware that everything has value, and that I should really take every session and look at each script and make sure that it's the best that it can possibly be. And you know what? Sometimes they're happy accidents. You'll be doing a read and you'll go, holy smokes, that's new. That's something different I haven't done. And then you might get off the session or whatever and mess around with that a little bit and think, oh, that's kind of a cool thing. Like maybe it's just the way you kind of cracked your voice or made it sound a little bit more conversational.
What was it? Was it Don who said, and I could be totally off base as who said this, but somebody said, like, remember, every time you read that script for that trailer or whatever, you're working on, to somebody, that is the most important project in the world.
Yeah. And the other thing Don said that I always caught on to was he said, every movie is the best movie of the year.
Nice.
Right.
Every movie is the greatest story ever told. Even if it's a crappy,
B movie or worse.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. It has to be the best movie of the world because it is important.
In that moment.
It is
the best movie you're going to ever see.
And so you will add your importance and credibility to it no matter what. So...
Well, that brings us to the end of another Pro Audio Suite. Thank you, Scott, for spending time with us and sharing your studio and a few stories about working in and out of your studio.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, guys. It was wonderful.
And I've got to say, Scott, you do have a lovely voice too.
Oh, thank you so much.
Now get me my movie promo work, says AP.
That was the Pro Audio Suite. If you have any questions or ideas for a show, let us know via our Facebook, the Pro Audio Suite Podcast.
You're looking for trouble.